All right, guys, welcome back to the Business of Social podcast powered by STN Digital. I am David Brickley, and on the Business of Social, we examine the digital marketing industry and analyze how brands successfully increase their ad revenue and brand affinity through cutting-edge content on social. In short, we talk to the experts so you're able to keep your thumb on the pulse of the ever-changing landscape of social and digital media. I'm a big daily reader of Digiday's content. They cover both the media and the marketing industries with a focus on tech and how that disrupts those industries. So I wanted to bring on a guy that I read every week. He's a senior reporter at Digiday. Sahil Patel joins us. How you doing, Sahil?
Hey, David. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, man. So like I was saying before we started recording, read your content very often, and I think it's interesting that you really have an inside knowledge talking to both, I think, publishers and also the different social networks on what their goals are and, how they're moving. So I'll start with, you've covered TV and online video for multiple years at a couple different stops at Video Inc. and Synopsis Digital. What do you think is the most disruptive factor in media as we sit here today?
I think it's probably what you guys talk about all the time, right? It's tech. I know, a lot of the conversations over the past few years has been about sort of the disruptive power of Facebook as it relates to sort of publishers and the more traditional media companies, right? But you look at companies like Amazon, you look at companies like Netflix. I mean, there's a reason you see some of these big major consolidations happening. AT&T buying Time Warner, Disney buying a lot of Fox. It's not because they're wanting to get bigger for getting bigger's sake, right? It's because of Netflix. It's because of Amazon. Yeah. They feel like they need to protect themselves by getting bigger.
And I think it's interesting, though, right when we kind of all agreed that everything's going OTT and linear continues to diminish, Roseanne pops up on ABC and gets 18.2 million viewers, which just set the whole industry on storm, because we haven't seen numbers like that in a very, very long time. So how do you, I guess, describe this industry? Because you can't, we know it's where it's going in 5 and 10 years, but linear is still so powerful and still reaches so many people. So how do you, I guess, explain where the industry is currently?
I think, I'm sure the TV guys will love to hear this because they've been trying to champion this for so long, which is I feel like eventually we're just going to stop talking about linear. Right? I think the idea is, what's the total viewing, right? 18 million people watched Roseanne. We don't know yet, and if the numbers are out, I just haven't looked at them yet, but we don't know how many of those, how many people on top of the 18 million watched it on Hulu, watched it on over-the-top video platforms, right?
Yep.
NBC just came out with this new metric that they want to use, right? In terms of, we're not going to give you just the Nielsen ratings. We're going to give you the total viewership of a show across all the different platforms and screens that can be viewed on. So I think that's what's the interesting and important thing, right? Where it's no longer about how many same-day viewers did you get at 8 p.m. on a Thursday night. It's how many people have been watching this show over the first week, or whatever the parameters the networks want to use.
That is interesting because, I think a lot of people always try to segment linear versus digital, linear versus OTT.
Right.
But to your point, especially with like Nielsen total ratings we talked a lot about on this show coming out, it seems like we're going to this mixture where it's just going to be a big number across all platforms.
Right.
How does that factor in your opinion with advertisement, though? Because I think we're also moving away from maybe the 30-second traditional ad. And if networks start to just give you a total number, how to inject those different, I guess, monetization opportunities.
I think unfortunately, it's always going to be a lot wait to be seen. You see the networks going really heavy into this, right? A lot of them are experimenting with reduced ad loads. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that people are no longer watching as often on linear, right? They're watching everything from video on demand to their DVRs to platforms like Hulu and even the network sites, which have lower ad loads. So if people are spending more time watching that, you got to have to create a linear experience that matches that, right? So I think it's still a lot of wait to be seen, because I know the networks want to be able to charge higher and want to be able to measure effectively, and so they can work with advertisers across and do these buys that kind of span all these different platforms. But just the understanding and unfortunately the knowledge just isn't there completely yet. There are still a ton of people on the marketing side, for lack of a better phrase, that just don't get it. It's still very easy to say, I'm going to buy a 30-second spot on this network that everyone knows. I'm probably not going to lose my job because I based it off of GRPs, right? Like that's just the reality that we're in. But it is moving in that direction. I just think it takes more education, more time, more pressure really from the market, where as we as consumers increasingly watch on these different platforms, it is going to lead to these fixes, these solutions. But I would actually argue, having covered this for like 7 years now, it's only the last year and a half where I feel like there's legitimate change finally happening. Instead of people saying, oh, in 3 to 5 years, this disruptive thing will happen, it finally feels like we're beginning to make these changes.
And a lot of that probably has to do with Netflix dropping $7 billion a year in original content. That might change the industry.
Yeah,
well, that's a pretty big deal.
I think it's they raised it to $8 billion and 700 original productions in 2018 alone. Everything amazing. From movies to TV shows to stand-up specials. They're eating the world, man, and I think it's forcing people to figure out fixes.
I want to move to Facebook, which has been in the news almost a little too much, for my opinion. But the Cambridge Analytica stuff comes out, obviously, and Zuckerberg's kind of on that media tour as we speak, and going to be, I think, in Congress and all that. So is this being blown out of proportion? Is this a huge deal in terms of where we see Facebook go?
I don't think it's being blown out of proportion. I think the really interesting thing is it has. What's the best way to put this? Now everybody knows how online advertising works. This is not just a Facebook problem, right? This is an online advertising problem, and people just didn't know, so they didn't pay attention to some of these practices that were considered common by everyone. I'm not trying to give Facebook a pass right now. I'm just saying it's an industry issue.
People all of a sudden know what cookies mean.
Yeah, exactly, right. And so I think it's more that this ecosystem is finally being covered in the way it should be covered. For a long time, people just didn't know, so it was never covered that way. It was looked at, it was treated at arm's length just because you didn't know what was actually happening. So I think it's not being blown out of proportion. It just so happens that we're talking about the second biggest advertising company on the planet after Google. We're talking about a company that has, not the greatest of relations with media and sort of advertising as well. I think it's just because it is Facebook, it feels a lot bigger. But I think the story is being reported with as seriousness as it needs to be.
In terms of Facebook, though, do you think in users, is there a possibility that millions and millions and millions and millions just get off the platform and that affects Facebook's bottom line at all, or is that not?
I don't think. Listen, there'll be enough people, and because it is of the moment, people pay attention to the delete Facebook movement. But I think we're not talking the other issue with Facebook, right? And I think we're going to be heading in that direction, which is the whole conversation around regulation and whatnot. But Facebook is not just a platform we use. It's become a utility. It really has for 2 million people, right? Like, this is not – I'm not an active Facebook user, but I have a Facebook account.
I always call it's the white pages. Our parents used to have the yellow pages and white pages that look people up. You have to have a Facebook to be a human. You have to prove that you're a human on Facebook.
I don't think there are a lot of people who are like, I'm a Facebook loyalist or like I'm a fan of Facebook. It's become a utility, and so – I don't.
It's like having a passport or anything like that. Yeah,
and so I just don't see it as meaningfully hurting their user numbers. I do think it's going. Obviously, with everything that's going on, we're going to see big changes being implemented at the company. We don't know how serious of these changes are going to be, but I don't think it's going to hurt the user number by any means.
You mentioned that people at networks aren't too thrilled with kind of what they're doing, their media partners, and I know you have you've talked to Facebook as well. But for publishers, what does Facebook want publishers to do now? Because with the algorithm changes and with Facebook Live being a huge thing last year, and now Facebook Watch seems to be something they're pushing. In your opinion, what do they want us to be doing as publishers and media conglomerates?
I will say, if you have an off the record conversation with any publisher, I think you get to the closest to the truth, which is I don't think Facebook knows. All Facebook cares about is people spending more time on Facebook, right? Originally, it was, okay, let's try video. Video, people spend more time watching video than performing other activities. So we're gonna change our platform to the point where newsfeed video is going to be sort of the biggest thing, the newest, coolest thing. People will watch it, and that's how you had the newsfeed video start.
And they would prioritize it effectively. Yeah.
Right. But the way they built it really prioritized like 45-second videos, 30-second videos, 90-second videos. So like, okay, well, we want people to spend more time on our platform. Let's try live, because the idea is live video is longer. It's just, you shoot things longer with live, and if it's longer, people will watch longer because it also is the evidence of the moment. Didn't work out. because Facebook's a tech company, Facebook's a media company without treating itself like a media company.
Yeah.
Which is actually, I would happy to go into how that's really caused a lot of its problems. Just acknowledge that you're a media company would really help you out. But so Live didn't work out. So now it's Watch, because Watch is like, oh, let's do a television-like platform with shows that have longer episodes, right? We'll pay for some of them. We also want, and they've been pushing this very hard since January, I would say, doing shows that have like social and community and interactive and transmedia elements, right? Like if it's a scripted show, have accounts for your characters where they can like interact with fans throughout the week between each episode. If it's a show, like for example, they have a show with ESPN right now, right? Where they do a version of First Take. First Take's a debate show on Facebook. They basically have formatted this thing where on Monday they'll have the guys debating about something, and then on Wednesday. And then you have people upload, and then one person gets to debate them on Friday, right? That's an interactive kind of show. That's the kind of stuff that Facebook wants. But again, it's probably not going to work. Watch in general, maybe. But it all is under the thinking of we are trying to find ways for people to spend more time on Facebook. Even when they say stuff like, now we're focused more on meaningful interactions. We don't care if that means people spend less time per day on Facebook. But if they have more meaningful interactions, I don't think they even know what the hell that means, right? But I think the idea is Facebook's media, and specifically its video efforts, since the beginning of the newsfeed video wave, has been entirely a product test, a series of product tests. And the unfortunate thing is they swept up a lot of publishers because they saw money, or the potential for money, and now it's hurt a lot of them. Because, again, Facebook doesn't actually care about the media companies that it says it cares about. They don't. They care about themselves. They care about their platform and their product. And they figured out video was a way to boost engagement and time spent on their platform. And
now, to your point, they're telling publishers like pay to play.
Yeah.
If you really want to.
Well, here's the thing. So, the live and newsfeed video subsidies ended, right? And then they're like, Watch is the next big thing. And we're going to pay for some shows. But now they want to own these shows more, right? So basically, if you're a publisher, it's like, okay, I want to make some money off of the stuff I'm doing on Facebook. Okay, I'll sell them some shows. Well, you're only making money off of the whatever margin you can negotiate, right, between the production costs and sort of whatever producer fee you are, because Facebook's going to end up owning their show, so you can't take that intellectual property and sell it elsewhere later on down the road. There are some deals where publishers are able to retain the ownership, but more and more Facebook is owning it. So okay, you make a little bit of money. Money on Watch. The mid-rolls have not been working out well enough where you're getting a significant amount from that, right? So like there's some money to be made. But before they even launched Watch, and I've gone back to this a couple of times, Facebook's CFO said, eventually we see Watch as an ecosystem where it can be monetized by revenue share. So even before they launched the platform, they were talking about, we're probably not going to pay you guys forever. So it's one of those things where if you can get the money now, make the money now, but like don't expect this money train, for lack of a better phrase, to exist forever, because eventually Facebook will shift, because they always shift.
Yeah, and I guess my concern is if Facebook's always worried about the user experience, that makes sense, all the shifting. But I feel like from a user now, I'm a Laker fan, so I like to see my Laker content, then maybe a Digiday article from you, then maybe an article from my friend, and then maybe a sponsored post. Where I feel like they're going now is, high school acquaintance, sponsored post, sponsored post, sponsored post.
Right.
My aunt and her dog, high school acquaintance, sponsored post, and that's not really an amazing user experience. Right. So I guess my fear, and I don't know if you agree or not, but if they keep on making these changes and algorithm changes that don't necessarily help the user, because I do want to see some of that content from the brands and from the publishers.
Right. I think the funny thing about Facebook is always going to be, in 6 months from now, it could be a completely different story. Hey, this didn't work out. We're going to bring more media content back into space.
You're right.
So like
that's a good point.
What's happening now could be completely different 6 months from now. So I think they're always going to be doing things to figure out ways to improve, let's say it nicely, the user experience and the product. But I think the key thing is never expect or rely too much on them, because what's good now is might not exist 6 months from now, and what is bad now might be greater 6 months from now. You just don't know. So don't have some of your work be there, but don't be overly reliant on them, because it's not good for your business.
Yeah, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Right.
I want to go back to what you said earlier. Facebook calling themselves a tech company when they'd be better off calling themselves a media company. Love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, let's just look at it very simply. Facebook sells advertising against content, right? There's content on Facebook. Facebook sells advertising. Like, it's a media company. Its business is media. Most of its revenue is the way media has monetized, right? Through advertising against the consumer and the audience that you have. The problem is it's the whole Silicon Valley approach. We're disruptive. We're a tech company. We're a tech platform. Our business just happens to be in media. I think actually YouTube CEO said something very similar to that. We're a tech platform. Our business just happens to be in video. It's like, no, you're a video company. Just call yourself that.
Yeah.
You are buying shows. I mean, Facebook is buying shows just the way NBC and Netflix buy shows.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So but because they call themselves a tech company, they kind of have always been able to flip away the criticisms that they've gotten about its media business and how it's affected both advertisers and publishers, right? Not so much anymore because of all this stuff. But if they'd acknowledged what they were from the beginning, they probably could have I'm not saying Cambridge Analytica would have never happened, but they would have been a much better spot to respond to it than acting like they have been, which is being blindsided in a lot of ways.
So, my day-to-day, I run a social media marketing agency, and a lot of our clients and what we're seeing in the analytical side is Instagram, from an organic standpoint, obviously, has taken the bread every step of the way the last year or so. As Facebook has turned down that organic, reach, people are now shifting resources to Instagram. And my thing is with that, and I want to get your opinion, how distant is Instagram from Facebook's day-to-day and their overall strategy? Are they pretty siloed, or since Facebook obviously owns Instagram, do you see those same principles being sent over to Instagram as well?
I would say unfortunately, it's a little bit of both, right? Like, they are siloed, right? It's run by Kevin. Like, it's a big company, obviously owned by Facebook, but they can do what they want to do. But I'll give you a great example of it, right? They're still so very much connected when Instagram stories first launched, and everyone was talking about how they're just completely cribbing Snapchat. By the way, Facebook cribbed the hashtag too from Twitter, but no one ever talks about that.
They all steal from each other. Let's be honest.
Yeah, exactly. They all steal from each other. Facebook also launched a stories product on Facebook, on WhatsApp, right? Just because it's not working on Facebook, it doesn't matter. Facebook, if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We don't care. We're that big. But you can see how the companies are still connected because they could do that, right? Very quickly, next to each other. But yeah, there's still sort of some of that independence on Instagram because of what the product is and how they want to maintain sort of the experience of that product and not make it too. You wouldn't call Instagram a utility the way Facebook is, right? So
that's true.
There is the understanding that there are distinct products, but because they're the parent, they're still very much connected in a variety of ways.
Yeah, it sure is nice if Facebook, for whatever reason, takes a little bit of a dip. It sure is nice to own Instagram and WhatsApp as well. And if Evan would have sold Snapchat for that $3 billion offer, he would have owned the whole industry essentially. Yeah, exactly. Twitter, so their first profitable quarter in over 12 years, which as a business owner, it's amazing that you can go that long without profit. But
that's Silicon Valley, though, right?
Yeah, exactly. But that means that things are they're feeling good internally finally after 12 years of those earning reports maybe not being where they want it to be. With Facebook and all the headlines that are coming out, what do you think is next for Twitter?
Well, they're actually on a very, very aggressive charm offensive with publishers. I joke about it where it's like the strategy has essentially become, oh, Facebook doesn't let you do that, we'll let you do that. And
now's the time to pounce. I think you would agree.
Right.
All these
Facebook has these terms. We'll give you better terms. And by the way, Snapchat's currently doing the same thing. Snapchat's releasing products and reaching out to discover publishers in a way where it's like, let us help you make more money. You see what's happening on Facebook. So all these other platforms are, it's you pounce when you see an opportunity, right? So all of these Twitter, Snapchat see an opportunity. With Twitter, though, it is very interesting because both from an advertising perspective and a publisher perspective, like they are very much like, we will give you the better terms that you want. Everything down to, like, for example, one complaint I've heard from multiple advertisers is, oh, we can't, for the longest amount of time, or since it launched, we couldn't buy individual publishers or shows on Watch. You bought a broader video deal, right, which would include some mid-roll placements inside Watch, would include this other thing, like it was sort of a broader buy. That's how Facebook did it all the time. With Twitter, Twitter works. I forget the most recent number, but let's say it's like around 300 or so media companies that are able to use the Amplify product, right, with the pre-rolls and whatnot. Yep. If you're an advertiser, you can buy an individual publisher if you wanted to. It's a very simple thing, right? But it's an example of like how Twitter's like, okay, this is what the giant does. Let us give you a much more favorable option if you want to do it. Until Facebook is still kind of testing them out, but Facebook has never done pre-rolls. So it's like, we will give you pre-rolls. If that's what you want, we will give you that. Facebook is taking a 45% cut of every dollar generated on mid-rolls. We'll only take 30, let's say. It's just Twitter has been very aggressive about this, and let's say I've heard plenty of publishers are like, we love Twitter. They seem like they care about us. They're working hard to make it easier for us to get an audience and get revenue from that audience.
Right.
So they're definitely courting publishers. Snap's doing the same thing. It's an opportunity, and see these guys see it.
Speaking of identity crisis, I think Snapchat at one time called themselves a camera company.
Yeah.
Which I wanted to agree with, but yeah. So with their UX changes and the Kylie Jenner tweet and the Rihanna tweet, they obviously went through a little bit of PR crisis as well. But you mentioned Discover and what they're trying to do. What do you think is next for Snapchat? And do they have it? Go ahead.
I think so. We're going to start to see maybe a little bit more of a loosening up of, because the other thing with Snap is it's always been very restrictive with terms, with distribution, with the partners they worked with, right? The sense I get is that they're loosening up a little bit, right? Giving publishers more options to make money, right? They're doing shows, but they're also doing the Discover magazine editions as well. And I think the separation, ultimately, people will get over it. I feel like it's when Facebook used to make constant changes to its platform, right? Everyone's like, this is different. I hate it. I think Snapchat's going through that right now, but I don't think we'll see what they say once the next earnings report comes out.
Right.
At least the data that I've been getting from third-party providers, like the app analytics companies, say installs are going up, right? Downloads are going up. So like from the third-party providers, they say there's no noticeable dip in terms of people deleting the app or not using it as much. We'll see what Snap says when the earnings come out. The interesting thing for me is going to be, now that if you're able to successfully separate media to the right and your friends and your family to the left, on the right, if you look at Snapchat right now, it's really tough to find some things unless you subscribe to them, right?
Very tough.
If you have a lot of influencer content being thrown at you, you have the Discover publishers and the shows. Unless you are following specific ones, they might not appear at the top. So that's going to be an issue for them to figure out. Not both Snap as well as the media partners they work with. How do we grow our visibility when it's a lot more now versus just one of 40 or 50?
I thought a big change that people didn't give enough credit to was when SportsCenter on Snapchat, when ESPN decided to do that. That was a big deal because for the entire history of ESPN since 1970, whatever, they've always said, if you want ESPN content, you come to us.
Yeah.
And that was the first time ESPN ever said, we're going to go to you now. We're going to go to a platform and put original content on there. Do you think that was a big deal? I mean, for ESPN, that conglomerate to say, hey, we're going to go to Snapchat and talk about SportsCenter, which is really, that was their main.
I don't think, I wouldn't say the specific SportsCenter deal was a big deal for them. I think the thing about ESPN is for the past year, 2 years, they've had to rapidly accelerate how they modernize, right? It can't no longer just be SportsCenter at 6 p.m. It's got to be all these different things. So I think the bigger deal is what ESPN is actually doing in terms of the overall change in the company, right? Everything from the launch of the upcoming, I think it's launching next week, of ESPN Plus, right? Obviously doing deals with Snapchat and Facebook for shows, right? But figuring out different ways to have all the SportsCenter brand outside of just pure news and highlights. I think that's the broader story versus like the specific Snapchat deal. I think that's just part of the broader, like, we got to figure out a way to modernize ESPN because obviously the old cable carriage fee business is not, I mean, it's still, let's be fair, very, very, very lucrative for them.
Yeah.
But obviously not as lucrative as it has been in the past.
But to your point, it's finally, I think a couple years ago, they kind of crossed their arms and said, again, come to us. And now they're like, now we need to diversify. We need to find different distribution outlets for us to survive in this new, 2020 era that's coming up.
I think, it goes back to what I said earlier, right? Which is that, for a long time, people were like, we know digital is going to be a thing, but it was off to the side. In the last year and a half, 2 years, people are getting serious. It's no longer moves. There's no longer. It's very rarely. I did a recent interview with John Martin, the CEO of Turner, and he said this one thing about it used to be CNN. The television side was separate from the editorial, like the digital side. Now it's all they're all in the same building. They're all together. I think that's. Yeah. It explains sort of what everyone is doing, right? Digital is no longer off to the side, and ESPN, the most prolific television company on the planet, is no different. Like, they have to figure things out. It's just that it seems like it's only been the last year and a half to 2 years where the big guys are getting really serious about the changes and actually implementing changes. Yeah, and
you've wrote a lot about Bleacher Report and House of Highlights even recently.
Right.
And that's interesting because you talk about ESPN. House of Highlights, maybe by themselves, killed the Sports Center model. I mean, just to be able, and Vine did as well with, again, I always say, to be able to see a Russell Westbrook dunk or a LeBron game winner on your feed, it made it so consumers necessarily didn't have to tune in at 6 p.m. for that recap. So it'll be interesting to see. What are your thoughts on the Bleacher Report, their new app and their new streaming app, and ESPN Plus? Do you think it's going to take a while for the consumers to make that part of their day, or?
Yeah, the Bleacher Report one is interesting because they said they're going to experiment with like subscription options, right? Maybe you can buy a league, or you can buy multiple leagues, or whatever. They're going to experiment with that stuff. But for the time being, after the months of free previews that they give out is over, and they actually start charging, it's going to be pay-per-view, right? You pay per game, pay per quarter, maybe. So we'll see how that goes, because it's not like people aren't used to buying individual games to television, but we'll see if it works in a streaming capacity. I think, but in terms of seeing significant growth in those areas, I believe it's going to take some time. ESPN Plus does not have the most important things that ESPN has, right? Listen, there's going to be a ton of like hockey fans who maybe pay for it because they like.
Everybody's calling it ESPN3.
Exactly. They're actually, no joke, they're taking a decent amount of ESPN3 content and putting it on ESPN Plus. Yeah. I think there are going to be people who pay for it, but I don't see it being this like massive subscriber generator in the first year. It's going to take some time, right?
So with media companies, though, I'm always fascinated with when you go to the OTT and ESPN decides to make ESPN Plus or even Bleacher Report app. Hey, 99 cents, you can watch, the Cavaliers play the Bucks if you're a big, big LeBron fan. How does like NBA on ESPN or NBA on TNT, how you would assume that would be a conflict of interest if people are watching and streaming rather than having to be forced to tune into the linear networks. Have you seen or heard any of those conversations of how they, I guess, balance that?
There hasn't. I think they're all thinking about it, but hasn't been much chatter. Listen, like every time you talk to them, they're also very quick to point out this is not going to eat into our existing partnerships in business, right? When I was at the Turner event to launch Bleacher Report Live, there was the president said like, there's no way that we're going to have this cannibalize our World Series or our partnerships with the cable distributors, right? It's extra stuff. It's stuff that we either
gotcha.
Right? That's why the people joke that ESPN Plus is ESPN3, right? Because they're not putting Monday Night Football on ESPN Plus anytime soon, right? They're not going to put their biggest properties are still going to be on linear or through TV everywhere, and that's a lot of that's tied with not just the partnerships they have with the distributors, but it's the partnerships that they have with the leagues and sort of how those rights get kind of played out, right? And some of those rights are not going to be up for another few years. So I think we'll see more of those conversations when the rights start coming up. Right?
So the way they're positioning it right now is, hey, we're not going to be taking anybody away from the traditional cable linear viewing. We're just going to access people that have no ability to watch the cable.
Right. Or people who cut the cord. It's like, oh, maybe we can bring them back.
Get them back.
Yeah. in a different way. Yeah.
But to your point, when they finally do move Monday Night Football over, I'm assuming that's going to be a large conversation, a lot of conflict, because people are going to say, well, now you can cut that cord. Now you don't have to watch ESPN.
And I'll be honest with you, NFL is going to have a lot to say about that. So
yeah,
we're going to hear these conversations more when the big sports rights come up again. Right now, the ones are pretty locked up for a few years.
Yeah, and I think 2020 is a big year because if Amazon or Facebook, to your point, comes in and bids for a Monday Night Football, that's going to change the game.
I kind of have a cynical take on it in that, and I could very well be proven wrong, but I have a cynical take that you're going to see the leagues use the tech companies as leverage to get more money.
Yeah.
I don't deny that Facebook is interested in live sports. They've done a few deals, right? Amazon's interested, Twitter's interested. I just don't see any of them kind of coming forward with sort of the, where you basically, because you have to hire a studio team, you have to hire people, you have to actually create and shoot the content, which I just don't know if I see them doing that. I see more and more what you've seen recently, which is like, they kind of become like syndicators of someone else, of content shot or shot by somebody else. I think that's more. That's my take on it. We'll see what happens. But I'm more, if I were a betting man, I'm more likely to believe that the networks will re-up or a network will buy rights versus buy exclusive rights versus like an Amazon or a Facebook doing it.
Monetization of social platforms. So let's stay with Bleacher Report just as an example. They've done a really good job of making a lot of branded content that's genuine to their audience. Mm-hmm. I think they've kind of set the stage for sports. When it comes to making that part of your revenue stream, like us making money on Instagram as Bleacher Report with all of our branded series and content, is there any fear from what you're hearing that at any given moment Instagram can turn that off, or do they understand that's a huge part of their business? Or
I think fear has become sort of just the standard in the industry. There's always fear. There's always going to be fear because it's an environment that you don't own and you don't control. There's no way they can. If you're stupid, maybe you don't fear it, but I don't think they are, right? So I think you're living in a constant state of fear when it comes to being a media company whose business is reliant on distributed platforms to not only find your audience but make money. I think what you're seeing more and more of is sort of the hedging, right? Like, don't just be an Instagram player, don't just be a Facebook player, do both. Be on YouTube as well. Have a portion of your audience that's on your app. Do all these different things, because that way, if one thing changes, it might hurt it a little bit, but it's not going to just wholesale wreck your business, right? So I think that's what you're seeing more and more.
So if you were the head of a media company that has millions upon millions of followers on all these different platforms, are you more focused on the stuff you can own, like the app and the email database and things like that? Are you playing in all the different distribution methods? Like how would you slice
I would say the core focus should be stuff that you own, and it could be in a variety of ways, right? It could be an app, it could be an app and a website, you could have a subscription offering that could work, but it's also stuff like make content that you own, you have the rights to, and sell it to different places, right? Or monetize it in different places. That's another form. I think those should always be the core areas of focus, and then where it makes sense for you, do the other things, right? If you're focused more and more on doing longer form programming, maybe you don't need to be on Facebook outside of maybe a deal or two that you do for Watch, right? But you focus heavily on distributing some of that through YouTube, finding distribution opportunities with syndication platforms, over-the-top platforms, like build it that way. Just what's right for you. But always, it's always better to focus on what you know and what you can control first. Yeah. And then find opportunities elsewhere.
And that's finance 101. Find a way to diversify your income. So if one drops off, you're still in a good spot. Yeah. We talked a little bit earlier about Twitter and their ability to pounce right now as Facebook kind of tightens up some different things. I really think there's an opening for a brand new platform. And I don't know if you feel like anyone currently, there's Vero, I think, that just came out that made a little bit of news and headway. But have you seen anyone that has the potential to kind of break out and challenge the Big Four?
Honestly, I'm really curious. Who would you say are the Big Four right now?
Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, YouTube.
Right.
Well, I just missed Instagram then. So there's five.
I think you can include Instagram as part of Facebook.
Yeah, exactly.
There. The last one that I think Vero is like one of those that come and go very quickly.
Yeah.
Last one
Peach and all that.
Yeah, I was trying to think of one of them. But Peach is the perfect one. I think the last one I felt that way about was actually Musically, and it feels like they've kind of topped off. They're where they are. and whoever owns them was smart enough to sell them
Yeah, $1 billion bucks.
At the peak. You have platforms like Musical.ly, you have platforms like Twitch, a few others that I don't know if you can say they will significantly challenge the major social platforms.
Yeah.
But have interesting audiences and actually weirdly enough, we heard a lot about Flipboard becoming a bigger driver of traffic at our recent publishing summit. So Flipboard might be making a resurgence. We don't know. Apple News is a big one, right? People are getting a lot of traffic and viewership on Apple News, but it's actually really, really behind on monetization. Personally, in my opinion, because Apple doesn't want to be heavily into the advertising business, right? Yeah. So you hear about those in different parts that make sense, but I don't think in a way that would be as significant as the kind of sizes you see with the big social platforms.
And you having such a deep background on video, I think you would probably agree there's no bigger time than now for original content. I mean, to your point about Apple and their original series, and Spotify now has original series, and Netflix and Snapchat Discover. No time than now. There's so many different platforms. I think if you're in the original content game, you're in a really good spot.
Well, it also depends on which type of original content game you're on, right? So, like, let's be fair. I think Spotify is kind of like scaling back on that stuff. I think more things that make sense, smartly make more sense for their platform, which was probably what they should have done from the beginning. I think it really depends. It's a great market for original content, right? I think the stat is somewhere around like 450 scripted shows last year on television alone. And then we talked about Netflix doing 700 original productions this year.
Wow.
Right. But it really depends on what kind of content creator you are, right? If you're making stuff that's like unscripted lifestyle, short form YouTube stuff, there's not really a lot out there for you right now outside of Facebook Watch, maybe Snapchat, but Snapchat also doesn't pay for the most part. You fund it yourself and then you do ad split. So like, that's a different model. Usually you expect to get paid if you're making an original show for a buyer. So yeah, that's a very limited market, right? But and let's not even include what Mr. Jeffrey Katzenberg is doing with Wonder Co, because that's a whole different thing that, we'll see how that shakes out. But if you're making TV shows, if you're making premium, longer form stuff, yeah, I know Facebook's looking to buy some of that, but then obviously you have Netflix, you have Amazon, you have still the networks, basic, premium, and cable, like, all buying. So there is sort of that great opportunity there, both here and especially internationally. But the flip side to that coin is Netflix is not the only one that's looking to own content, right, or produce stuff in-house, right? Amazon wants to do that more and more. The networks want to do that more and more. Even Facebook wants to do that more and more. So you have to kind of like then have those serious internal conversations about how do we treat our intellectual property, our IP. Is it better for us to just be a producer for hire in most cases, or do we try to find ways to retain some of that ownership so we can find additional revenue streams down the road, whether it's through syndication, additional licenses, all the other things that studios and content producers have been able to do for the longest amount of time. Great time to be an original content creator, especially if you're in the premium business, right? But there are still clouds there, even with all the money that's flowing in.
I want to throw one theory your way and see if you agree. So my thought is the New York Yankees have 1.8 million followers on Instagram. Their 1-minute videos on their feed usually get about 300,000 views. Can we then equate that? I mean, you talked about First Take and these different debate shows on sports. Some of those shows only get like 131,000 viewers a show,
right? And
this is on a cable network. Can we equate that 131,000 on linear to 300,000 on digital and monetize?
No, not right now. Well, it's as simple as you can't equate short form views to a viewer. I'll give you. Let's say, let's go with the First Take option. I don't know what their numbers are, but let's say, an episode of First Take Your Take on Facebook Watch gets 5 million views. That sounds great, right? View on Facebook is counted at 3 seconds. So the only guarantee we have, at least publicly, is 5 million times that video played for at least 3 seconds.
Yep.
If First Take on ESPN's on the ESPN cable channel averages, let's say, I'm making up numbers here, so if ESPN PR is listening, you don't have to correct me. Let's say they get 800,000 viewers.
Right.
You would think 5 million is better, but that's 800,000 viewers per minute on average across the telecast, right? So it's simple math, right? Do you want 800,000 people on average for an hour, or do you want 5 million for 3 seconds?
Yeah, that's a good point.
And that's why you can't equate them. You can't equate the social video. I think a lot of people call them vanity metrics.
Yeah,
much impressions. You can't equate that to a viewer. That I know there's a lot of like inefficiencies with how television measures how many viewers it has.
Nielsen's
right. Yeah, but we can talk about that. But like it's still, you can't equate a viewer to a view. It's just they're not on the same planet, right?
So do you think that's coming where Facebook and Instagram, they can provide you with that data where on average and people listening or watching throughout the duration?
I think people want them to. I don't know how likely we are to see it coming from the platforms themselves, but you see it. You see it with what NBC and the networks are trying to do with total viewing. You see it with the work that apparently Nielsen is constantly doing to try to improve its ratings products. Yeah. Like you see efforts in that direction where you can compare a digital performance to a linear performance, and we'll get there in some capacity, I'm sure. I don't know how efficient it will be, but I don't know. We'll see.
It seems like the industry as a whole needs to agree on what the metric is, so we all can grade on that.
Yeah, and it's not in Facebook's best interest to give you an average minute audience for their watch shows. It's easy. Yeah. It's nicer to say I have 5 million views.
Yeah, that's very true. So what are you surprised that publishers don't do more of? Is there, in terms of undervalued attention, is there things that you see that just make a total sense that you feel publishers aren't taken seriously enough?
Well, I think they're finally taking it seriously now, but I always was fascinated by like people who did not pay attention or did not spend enough time diversifying their revenue sources. Like, should that be first thing if you're building a media business? Like, I know I'm simplifying things a ton right now, but like print, television have always at the very minimum had dual revenue streams. Always. Yeah. Or not always, but for the longest amount of time.
Right.
And then digital media comes along and it's like, we're going to be entirely ad funded. I mean, that's a terrible idea. Mm-hmm. It seems like figure out different ways to make money. So you see more and more publishers talking about that these days, whether it's through commerce, subscriptions, the broad term of consumer revenue or reader revenue, or however you want to describe it. But that was always fascinating to me. It's like, why? Like, should that be the first thing you do if you're trying to build a media company?
Yeah. And I think that the Facebook algorithm changed a few months ago. I mean, literally businesses went out of business because they based their entire strategy on being able to boost post or reach a certain audience. I'll leave you with this. What are you looking forward to the rest of 2018 when it comes to social and digital and where we're headed?
I think removing just the fallout and the continuing fallout of Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, I am curious to see which platforms continue to succeed or just do better with terms of quality video. No more like, I have nothing against UGC. I have nothing against like really short form social stuff, but a lot of that is flyby stuff. You forget about it the minute after you see it, right? So will there be any successes on the actual quality, professional, premium, quote unquote side? That will be interesting to me, whether it's through a Facebook Watch, whether it's YouTube Red, the scripted stuff that Snapchat wants to launch soon, right? Like, I'm curious to see how that shakes out. And then beyond that, I think one of the most fascinating stories is Netflix versus the world right now. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to seeing if the Department of Justice approves the AT&T Time Warner merger, how does that shake things up? How does Disney Plus Fox shake things up? That's the thing I'm keeping my eye out on most. And I'll actually say one more. As Netflix is eating the world, don't forget to look at Amazon either, because if you look at them, they seem to be competing with everybody right now. They compete with Netflix here, they're competing with YouTube here, they're competing with
crazy
just retailers here. Like,
it's almost getting to like a monopoly thing. I think they're getting into like medical device sales and medical. Right. It's crazy.
It's like they seem like they're in every market, in every industry. So while Netflix is eating entertainment, I'm curious to see how Amazon does it with everybody.
So it all comes full circle. It sounds like you agree with Jeff Bezos and the diversifying of his income and how he does it all, man.
The first $100 billion man probably did something right along the way.
Yeah, I agree. Well, cool, man. It's been a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much for all your time. Check out all his work. He's a senior reporter at Digiday. Sahil Patel, thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, boss.
Cheers.
All right, there he is. What a good conversation. This guy, like I mentioned, the good thing about what he does is he's able to talk to people inside Facebook, inside Instagram, but also talk to the big media publishers. And I think how that interaction is happening. I think what we learned from this conversation is it's ever evolving, it's ever changing, and I think if you're in this industry, it's important to make sure that you're diversifying what you're doing on multiple platforms. So if one changes, it doesn't screw up your entire strategy. But at the same time, you got to stay on top of this stuff, because as it changes, you have to kind of change and shift and evolve from that. I also thought what was interesting about original content, and that you can't currently equate a linear tune-in view from Nielsen to a 3-second view on Facebook, and that makes a whole lot of sense. So we'll see as Nielsen total ratings and as these different companies try to find a way to bundle everything up, whether it's OTT, social, linear, and try to give us a metric that advertisers can spend against. But it was a great talk as always. Want to shout out producers David Furker, and Auntie Lightning, and also Sam Howard. This is the Business of Social podcast.